if somebody wants to do a pilgrimage of our mission journey someday, it occurs to me they'd have to start here in Salem, because we were trained over at the YWAM base and sent to outer Mongolia. And so I'm going to talk to you a bit about that today. I'm a storyteller, not a preacher, so if you came expecting a sermon, all I can do is apologize. I'm going to just be who God made me to be, and that's how it is. So my wife Louise and I, she's here with me today, have been in missions since 1987. We started out with the Navajo tribe in Arizona. But somewhere along the way, just a year in, really, God caught us through a class called Perspectives on the World Christian Movement. Has anybody ever heard of that class? Yeah? Some of you have. It's offered right here in Salem. I'm going to be teaching in it tomorrow night, which is another reason we're here. And he grabbed us and really opened our minds to what he was doing around the world. And even though we were already missionaries, this class drove us off the mission field and took us in a new direction, because we wanted to be involved in seeing brand new expressions of the body of Christ coming out of nothingness in the complete darkness, seeing the nations turn from darkness to light, as Paul says, from the kingdom of Satan to the kingdom of our glorious Lord. And so to do that, we had to leave the Navajo, because they were already reached. We wanted to go to unreached peoples. And for us, that was Mongolia. Mongolia, for those of you who aren't familiar, is a land that's sandwiched between China and Russia. It was completely closed off to the gospel for my entire life, up to the point just before our training. Communism had come to Mongolia in 1921. They forced all the missionaries out of the country. The gospel had not taken root there through the early missions efforts, and so there were 0 believers in this nation. And that was the condition all the way until communism fell in 1989. When we were preparing to go to Mongolia, I took a short-term trip there. I actually missed the last week of my discipleship training school. Don't tell them over. No, they knew. Anyway, to attend a meeting about Mongolia in Hong Kong, and then I went into the country. At that time, there were about 45 missionaries in Mongolia. It had just opened to the gospel, and all of them, 100% of them, were in the capital city of Ulaanbaatar. And one of the things God began speaking to Louise and I was that he didn't want us working where everybody else was already working. He wanted us to plant the church in a place that had never, ever even heard of his son. And so we were like, we can't work here. We can't be in the capital where everybody else is. But we met this young Swedish couple that was leading a team for a place called Erdenet. And Erdenet, there it is the 3rd largest of Mongolia's cities. That sounds really impressive. It's also the smallest. There's only 3 cities in Mongolia. It just sounds better to say 3rd largest, I think. Is a mining town. And so a team began to form. It started with Magnus and Maria Alphonse, who were there's Maria and there's Magnus. They were this young Swedish couple who had the vision to plant a church, plant a reproducing church planting movement, which we now call a disciple-making movement, in Erdenet, Mongolia. And the team began to coalesce around them. Louise and I and our 3 children threw in with them, and we finished our training and went from here, from Salem, Oregon, to join them. Then we were joined by a young Russian couple, Ruslan and Svetlana. That made it 3 nationalities on the team. And a young guy from Southern Oregon, Lance Reinhardt, and Mats from Edsbyn, Sweden. He was a baker, and we needed someone to run a bakery we had started for the poor. The church started out through short evangelism trips from the capital with Mongolian believers, and 14 teenage girls gave their lives to Jesus. Now, this was not our target, actually. This wasn't our strategy that we trained for. We wanted to see whole families come to faith and heads of households, place their trust in Jesus. And it was teenage girls, and we're like, teenage girls are great. This is not some kind of misogynistic thing. It's a strategic issue that teenage girls don't generally make the decisions for everybody else in the family, right? Except at the mall. And so we were a bit taken aback by the response, but we also had already learned that all the churches in Mongolia were only seeing responses from people under 20. The churches in the capital city were all youth groups. And so we kind of saw this coming, that it would be youth. We just thought we'd have some teenage boys, and we didn't. Anyway, we started with what we had. And those teenage girls, we gathered them in house churches. This was what we had been trained to do. We were doing what you're doing right now here, but in a very simple fashion in living rooms. So they were face-to-face, groups of 12 or less, and they were learning to obey Jesus, both individually and corporately. They had worship, they had prayer, they had learning from the Word. All of the things that you're doing here, they did in little Soviet bloc apartments all over town. And these groups grew really rapidly because the girls were natural evangelists. We didn't know this going into it, but they would just gossip the gospel to everybody. And they would bring their friends to these groups, and then they were too big for everyone to interact, and that's what we wanted, so we made new groups. And in the beginning, we missionaries could lead them, but very, very quickly, there were too many. And so we had to appoint fairly new believers to lead small house churches. You think, oh man, that sounds dangerous. I can't believe you did that. How irresponsible. Well, you know what? These groups were so simple that it wasn't what you're thinking. You know, if you appoint a new believer to lead this thing, you're asking for a disaster, right? Okay, but a group of 11 of their friends, come on. They were leading them out on the streets before they got saved anyway, and we just worked with the leaders who then passed everything on immediately to their friends. The way we did it was we focused on, from the very first moment, right as they were coming to Christ, we baptized them without any delays, really. Any sincerely repentant believer, we just baptized them. And so those 14 were baptized, and we began to teach them to obey Jesus, because that's what the Great Commission says, right? Isn't that what Jesus told us to do? He said, go and make disciples. And I'm sure some disciple at that point said, how, Jesus, how? He's like, oh gosh, Thaddeus, you know, you just interrupt me. You throw me off my thing. Okay, I have to start over. Go into all nations and make disciples. I'll tell you. Baptizing them and teaching them to obey all that I have commanded you. Oh, that's simple, Jesus, you know? And so that's what we did. We took Jesus's basic commands. There's 7 of them, it turns out. 7 commands that are for everybody. Now, you heard one earlier today that you knew instinctively wasn't for you. It said, go and find someone holding the foal of a donkey and renting up a room from them or something. You don't do that, right? We'd have too many donkeys in church. Well, let's not go there. Anyway, so the commands of Jesus, I'm using a cross graphic just so you can remember it. The most important command of Jesus, if I ask, people say, oh, love the Lord your God with all your, and it's like, well, no, that's not true. People get all shocked. It's not? No, that's half the command. The other half of the command is love others. In fact, the Bible says you can't love God and not love others. If you say that you do that, you're a liar, and the truth is not in you. So the command is the law of love, and it goes in 2 directions, or many directions actually, because it goes to enemies and family and your neighbor and all sorts of people you've never met, and then it goes to God. It splashes back to God, and we receive God's love, and we're able to love others with that. It's not something you summon up on your own. I think a lot of people think, I gotta love the Lord my God with all my strength. That's the Old Testament command, by the way. Okay, you can't do it. That's the thing with all the Old Testament commands. They're there to show you what you cannot do. Ever tried? How long has anybody ever pulled off loving God with all their heart, all their soul, all their mind? You know, minutes, seconds. I mean, it's like trying to be an X-Man and shoot beams out of your eyes or something up to God. You just can't pull it off. So what did Jesus say? A new command I give unto you. As I have loved you, so love. That you can do, because it's not dependent on you. It's not dependent on your sweet, stinking flesh. You're receiving from God and you're sharing it out. That's so much better. Anyway, under these commands, there's other commands Jesus gave us. There's repent, believe, and receive the Holy Spirit. And these 3 go together, and they go on for the rest of your time here on earth, walking with God. Okay? You're entering into a relationship here, but you need to keep believing. You need to keep repenting. And you need to keep asking the Holy Spirit to come in and fill you anew. Baptize, okay? We baptized 14 teenage girls. They've baptized thousands and tens of thousands since then. We didn't baptize any more Mongolians after that first baptism. I baptized a few Russians to start a Russian church that we started by accident, but it just happened. Anyway, and it was, anyway, I don't have time to tell that story. It was pretty much a horror show because I couldn't remember how to say the words in Russian, and I had a little piece of paper, and the first lady was too big, and a wave went up and washed the paper down the drain, and then after that, everybody had to tell me how to baptize them. It was just awful. I still shudder when I think of my great Russian baptism. Anyway, but I know it now, okay, because it's burned in my memory forever. Ya kresho vas vo imya, otsa isina isveto veduka. Yeah, because you go through something like that and you'll never forget. Anyway, baptized. The believers baptized each other. Baptism isn't something that's reserved for somebody who's been through seminary and, all of this. I mean, it's the easiest command of Jesus to obey. I knew how to dunk people underwater when I was 7 years old in the Glendale swimming pool. It's not hard. There's nothing to it. I think the devil came and stole it and gave it to seminaries to hand out or something. So we just had them baptize each other. Sometimes you'd be baptized by somebody who was dripping wet from their own baptism. Really, that quick? Yeah, you can baptize somebody as soon as you're baptized. So our rule was, it's like fishermen. You catch them, you clean them. If they had led somebody to the Lord, that's who they were supposed to baptize. Talk to dad, okay? This is a relationship, and Jesus commands us to pray because it's communication. This includes reading your Bible if you've got it, because God will speak to you through his word. But this is all about communicating with the Father. It's about relationship. Under loving others, we have break bread. The Lord's Supper, it's our gathering together. It's the ecclesia where 2 or more of you are gathered in my name. There I am also. That's all here. You're obeying this command right now. If you're sitting there judging yourself harshly as I share these commands, you can go, yay, I did that one. Okay, great. Give generously. We had an opportunity this morning, but giving isn't just the bucket, right? It's a lifestyle. And because it's not a percentage, that's the Old Testament again, Jesus said give generously. We're supposed to live this life in his spirit, waking up every morning and saying, hey, Dad, what does giving look like today for me? And then stepping out into the opportunities he gives you. And it'll be different every day and every week. It shouldn't be something you can do on a calculator. It's supposed to be happening in your heart and in your communication with God and your loving others. And then make disciples. Teach others to obey these commands. So we kept it really simple. This was what all of the teaching was. The word was stories of Jesus and things backing up these commands, teaching them how to live them out. And you can learn these in 5 minutes on a napkin. But you'll spend the rest of your life unpacking them. All our believers knew how to obey Jesus within minutes of being saved. And yet they were figuring out what the practicalities were the whole time we were there, and to this day. We had this problem of only having teenagers and really only half a youth group because we just had girls going on. We had incredible growth through their evangelism. We were 120 baptized believers by our first birthday as a church, and we were excited about that, but at the same time we knew we had a huge problem because they were all teenage girls. 120 teenage girls. And teenage boys would come. They were strangely attracted to our congregation, but not for any of the right reasons, and they wouldn't stay. And we'd see them later on the streets and ask them, and they go, come on, it's for girls, right? No, it's not. I go there. Well, you're a foreigner. Well, that's true, but Jesus is there. He's not a girl. He's a foreigner too. Oh, it's hard to argue when you don't have that much language. So we realized we had a problem, and we were calling out to God to maybe solve our misstep. Maybe we shouldn't have started when we did, with who we did, who knows? But God was big enough to even fix our problems, our lapses of strategy or whatever. And so in calling out to God, we got April 1994. We'd been there for a year and 4 months, and a Russian team of young girls came to town. You wouldn't think your solution for your problem of only having young girls would be a team of young girls from somewhere else. But they came to town and they started praying for sick people. And everybody they prayed for was instantly and miraculously healed in front of an ever-growing crowd. The crowd was there because they'd never seen young, beautiful Russian women walk into the slums before. That had never happened. But that's where we sent them with their translator, because that's where we didn't have any response up to this point. And it was amazing. Lame woman walked, a deaf man heard. They dragged him over to pray for the town mute, who everybody knew, never spoken a word in his life, 21 years old. And they prayed for him. His arms shot up in the air, and he started praising God. And he was praising God in some language that no one there spoke. So it wasn't Russian, and it wasn't Mongolian. I'm inclined to believe it was tongues, but it could have been anything. They didn't have that much breadth of experience. So somebody said, one of his friends he'd grown up with, said, shoot, he can't even speak Mongolian. And the guy stopped praising God, looked at his friend, glared at him, and said, of course I can speak Mongolian. So it was fantastic. This crowd, it became a throng. Demons started to manifest. They were kicked out. These girls, these young girls from a Bible school in Russia, were just casting out demons, praying for the sick, seeing them healed right in front of your eyes. They prayed for our believers. Everybody was filled with the Holy Spirit, started speaking in tongues. We had a holy mess on our hands. You couldn't pray for somebody without them falling over. The power of God was so strong, it looked like human pickup sticks in our meetings. And so we were so, I can admit weakness. We were so afraid that another missionary would visit during this mess and that we'd be in trouble, because they already didn't think that anything good was going to come of having undertrained YWAMers out there in AirNet. So we made a rule that everybody had to stand 1 meter, that's 1 yard for you Americans, away from anybody when they prayed for them. You had to have that much distance, because God was going to do something, but we wanted anyone looking to know that we hadn't done it, So we called that Miracle April. People swarmed into the church, and suddenly overnight we had all ages and both genders. No other church in the country had anybody over 20, and suddenly the church in Erdenet looked like the same demographics as the city of Erdenet outside, just a smaller version. And this guy over here, his name was Damdenstern, led 24 people to Christ his first evening as a believer, 3 large families. He then brought them to my house the next day because he was asking where the Christians lived, and our Christians up to this point had been kind of nameless, faceless teenage girls. Nobody knew where they lived, but everybody knew where the Americans lived. So he brought these 24 people to my house and said, they're all new believers. What do I do with them? He'd been saved, for 16 hours or less. I don't know. And I said, well, now you're a house church leader. And he was like, okay. Oh, no, it's not okay. Your house church is too big. We don't let them get this big. And so I talked to him about having a disciple, and he told me, well, I taught my neighbor how to win people to Christ last night. Does he count? He totally counts. I'm thinking my home church, we would have made the guy an elder. You led someone to Christ? Oh my gosh, you're on staff. You're our evangelism pastor. And so I said, he totally counts. So they started 2 house churches before Damdenstern was 24 hours old in the faith. Some of your best church planters are new converts. Our family, the church was growing in all sorts of really fantastic ways. We were very excited about it, not only numerically, but we were growing in the area of indigenous worship. All the churches in Mongolia were singing translated worship songs. They were actually worship songs of the Vineyard or Hosanna Integrity at the time. They were Western praise choruses that were translated into Mongolian. And we felt like Jesus has not been waiting for 2,000 years to hear Mongolians sing Southern California praise choruses. So we held them out. We wouldn't teach them any songs. They kept asking for new songs, and we'd say, no, write them yourself. And they began to. And so the most incredible indigenous worship that was from them, their words, their music, sounded like, you turn on the Mongolian radio station, it sounded a lot like it. I mean, they were young people mostly. It was Mongolian pop. So, they were kind of rewriting or in their heads using that style of music. Be like here, if a youth group used Justin Bieber's Ooh Baby Baby, and it was Ooh Baby Baby Jesus, and it became a Christmas hit. Anyway, it wasn't old countryside music, because that wasn't what the teenagers listened to. That came later. As older people came in the church, they brought the kinds of music they liked as well. But our family was growing too. Louise and I had discovered that we were expecting, just when we moved up to AirNet to join the team. And so on November 2nd of 1994, Louise gave birth in our apartment to Jedediah Patrick Hogan, our first son. These are my 3 daughters welcoming him into the world. A friend of mine said, history has shown that throughout the ages, whenever the kingdom advanced, someone first had to pay a terrible price. And we were just about to discover how high a price could be required to see the kingdom come to Mongolia. With his birth, we entered into 2 solid months of spiritual attack. It was the most overwhelming and devastating time we've ever walked through, our entire team, the church. Everything seemed to come at us at the same time like a tsunami. Basically, up to that point, everything we'd done had kind of worked, and we hadn't had too much pushback at all, really close to none. The people in the capital city felt a lot of oppression. There was constant attack there, not in AirNet. And my theory is this. AirNet was a brand new city. It was built in 1975 because they discovered copper ore. It was a copper mining city. I don't think when Satan had all of Mongolia lock, stock, and barrel, locked up tighter than a drum under his control, I don't think when they built a new city in the middle of it, he cared too much about assigning anybody to it, any principality or power or anything. Why would he? He owned everybody that was there. There were no Christians there. And so God had done an end run around the enemy. He'd sent us to a place where there was really no defenses in place. And it had all been so easy that we'd forgotten what we'd learned over here a couple miles away from Dean Sherman about spiritual warfare. I mean, there wasn't that much opportunity to practice it. We didn't stay on our guard, and it hit us like a Mack truck. And we had 4 cult groups move into town the same week my son was born. We went from no opposition to just savaging of the church. People literally seeking them out, asking at the apartments, where are the believers? We had leaders fall into sin, have to be removed from ministry. Had a church split where 100 people left the church angry, and it tore families in half. It was devastating. We had people just cut off relationship and walk away from us and from their faith, people we'd been pouring our lives into. I can't even begin to list all the horrible things that happened during those 2 months of November and December. But I can tell you that by mid-December, in our team meetings, we were already talking about pulling out. It didn't seem like there'd be anything left. It seemed like the church in AirNet was finished. We were watching it run through our fingers like sand, beach sand. And so we were talking about maybe redeploying or, figuring out what to do next, but we weren't going to stay. We didn't think it could get any worse, but it was just about to. On Christmas Eve, I woke up to my wife's screams. She'd gone to check on our baby, who had been perfectly healthy. This picture was taken the night before. He learned to smile that night, and we took a picture of him. It was his first smile. It was also the last that we saw. Jesus saw the next one because she had found him dead in his bed the next morning of sudden infant death syndrome. 2 days later, another girl in the church dropped dead for no reason whatsoever. There was no cause. And we realized that the enemy, that liar, that thief, who Jesus said had been a murderer from the very beginning, had just upped his game. And there were no limits. He was going after our weakest and most defenseless members. And for all we knew, it would just continue. And it was such a devastating time. It was worst Christmas that we'll ever live through, I think. And we found ourselves 3 days later out on a hillside outside of AirNet, hacking a grave into the frozen soil. Our tears literally freezing. It was -40 in the wind chill. Our tears would freeze and fall to the ground like diamonds, bounce off our boots. And I had to kneel on the ground and lay the body of my only son into this hole which we had to hurriedly fill in. A friend said a few words over it, and then we had to get in the van and go because we were in danger of losing fingers and noses. It was so cold. And we went down to a memorial service in the city that the church had arranged, and it was at that memorial service that I felt prompted to say something, and I got up and I said, look, I don't know if you guys are even going to be here next year to celebrate Jesus' birthday. It doesn't look like this church is going to make it, but I want you to know one thing. We were planning on leaving, and now the devil's gone too far, and we're not leaving. We're going to stay here, and we're going to rip his kingdom apart limb from limb, and if he doesn't like it, he'd better kill all of us, because this is war. And I was speaking from my heart. I didn't care what they did at that point. I was a grieving father, I really didn't care what the impact would be, but I had just declared war to a room full of Mongolians. The last time they got really excited, they took over the known world. And so you really have to know what you're doing at these moments. There was this reaction. The elders ran forward, grabbed the mic, and called for fasting and prayer. And the church began to fight back. This is a stone I later went and placed on my son's grave in later years. And you can see it gives the dates and everything. But these 3 words at the bottom are really what sum up the whole thing for Louise and I. And we sang about this earlier. Jesus is worthy. Worthy, worthy, worthy is the Lamb who was slain, because with his blood, he purchased men for God from every tribe, every tongue, every people, and every nation. Jesus is worthy of the worship of the Mongolians, and he has been, but it went, almost 2 millennia without him receiving any worship. The Great Commission was given so long ago, and yet he's worthy of their worship. And he's worthy of anything you and I could be asked to walk through in this breath of a life that we have. We sang a song about that too, didn't we? Take this for your glory. You don't know what's going to happen, but I know one thing. Jesus Christ said, if you seek to hold on to your life, grab it, keep it, which is all of our gut reaction, right? You'll lose it. And if you let go your life for my sake and the gospel's, you get it all back and everything else thrown in besides. So he's worthy, and that's what we learned through this whole experience. The church went into fasting and prayer. We prayed in the high places around the city. The cold drove us inside. We prayed in apartments, and it went on till 3 a.m. And at 3 a.m, I'll never forget this. I was with a group of leaders, and we were on our faces praying, and something broke. I don't know how else to describe it. There was this huge cracking sound. I looked up because I thought one of the Mongols had leaned back in the chairs and broken them, which we'd warned them not to do time and time again. And everybody was looking around. Everybody had heard this sound, and nobody could find any explanation for it, and it had been loud. And I didn't want to say anything because I knew it said in Proverbs, even a fool can appear wise if he keeps his mouth shut. And I had no idea what it was because Dean's class on spiritual warfare had not covered the crack at 3 a.m. Okay, maybe I'm too specific. But we just sat there, and finally a new believer who had kind of snuck in to be with the leaders said, does this mean we can go home now? I love new believers. They have no clue about how to sound spiritual. And so I laughed and said, we have to sing a song first because I know how to sound spiritual. So we sang a song and we went home, and we didn't know this because there was no cell phone, no texting, anything. This was Mongolia in the 1990s. Every single group had gone home at 3 a.m. They all reported in different ways. They all knew it was over and there was nothing left to pray about. And Jesus began to heal 2 months of severe damage. And in 3 weeks, everything was healed and set right. The 2 deaths were healed in eternity. But the church split. 100 people came back weeping. Every single person. We did not lose one believer to the cults. After all that effort, they didn't get one. Everything. People were restored. They repented of their sin. They came back and said, I don't know what came over me. I'm so sorry. Will you forgive me? It was an amazing time. And the church began to grow again. We were focusing on our efforts on working ourselves out of a job. And the Mongols were being trained to do everything we had done, all of the teaching, and they were leading, and they had drama teams and worship teams and everything. Everything that we were doing was being handed over to the Mongols. We'd do it in front of them, and they'd watch. We'd do it with them. We'd do it together. Then they'd do it, and we'd watch, make sure it had taken place, and then we'd leave. We called it SAVE, show, assist, view, and exit. And that was our training model. You could do that with anything. And so that's what we did. On Easter 1996, just before that, we had realized in January that we weren't doing anything anymore. We'd literally worked ourselves completely out of a job. And so on Easter 1996, in front of 800 Mongolians, we had daughter churches by this point, one granddaughter church. We made a baton, explained the Olympic relay race, and said, we're done running our part of the race. It's your turn. And we passed the baton to the Mongolian leaders that God had raised up. And we left town. We were done in Mongolia. 3.5 years, and we'd finished planting a church planting movement. Louise and I just went back. It was Louise's first time back since 2000, 18 years. I'd been back to teach. The Mongolians had started a Mongolian mission training thing. It's now called YWAM Erdenet. And they were having their 20th anniversary of this, so they invited both of us to come and be a part of that celebration. When we went, it would have been the day, right in the middle of the conference, was our son's, what would have been Jedediah's 24th birthday. So we asked if we could go out to the grave, thinking they'd just get us a car, and we'd go out there with a single driver. Turned out 3 vans full of people went out with us. And when we got out there, we were stunned and overwhelmed to find that the church and the mission center had set up a monument on the first missionary grave in the modern history of Mongolia. Out of their own money, I mean, these are impoverished people. Missionaries that don't have enough to live on took up a collection to honor our son. And at the bottom, you can see there, barely at the bottom, there's the logo of the church, which is a crown being held with 2 hands to King Jesus. And it says, we remember you. They added that to what had been on that stone I had made years ago. And it just overwhelmed us. And we stood there and cried and cried and cried. It was the second time our tears had frozen on our face in that spot. But there had to be a terrible price paid for the kingdom to come to Mongolia. There was a sacrifice, but it resulted. You have to, if you pay a terrible price, you need to ask the question, what did I buy? And if you ask the question, how many Christians does it take to send out a single missionary? Then you'll see, maybe, that Mongolia is the top missionary sending nation on planet Earth. It takes less Mongolian believers to send out a missionary than any other nation in the world. This is amazing. This is a country that had no believers in the end of 1989, and now they send more missionaries than any other nation. It's about worship. You know, Jesus is being worshiped where he's never been worshiped before. This was at the conference we were just at. There were believers from across Mongolia, and it's by invitation only because too many people try to come. And so each church just gets a couple delegates. They asked us to share as we were about to leave after we had been out to our son's grave. And I told them, look, I said, says on this new stone, as it said on the old one, Jesus is worthy. And I talked to them about that. But I said, looking out at all of you, I need to tell you something that I've just realized for the first time standing here. You're worth it too. You're worth it. You guys are changing the world. You're sending missionaries all over the place. You're sacrificing. You're following the example that was set for you, and you're following Jesus Christ, and you're worth it. And we'd do it all again. We'd do it all again as hard as it was, because you're worth it. It's about worship. You know, now Jesus is being worshiped not just by Mongolians, but by their disciples among the Buryat, among the Hazara of Afghanistan, among the Darkhad, the Oirat, the Tuvinians, the Tu people of Gansu province, the Dongzhang of China, the North Koreans, the Tibetans. I could go on and on and on. Mongols have started church planting movements among dozens of people groups in the short time that they've been following Jesus. There's been so much fruit from our just saying yes to God. And there's nothing special about us. You could ask the other missionaries in Mongolia. They were like, oh, those YWAMers, you know? I mean, there's nothing. We didn't have doctor or reverend in front of our name or anything. But God is bigger than that. And God had decided to do something in Mongolia. That's all I have. I really want to thank you for listening so attentively. And really quickly, could you hand me the books, Louise? We have a book table out there, and I just brought along 2 books today because I obviously shared this story very short. There's A Sheep in My Bathtub is my book about what God did in Mongolia. And it's a great read. I guarantee one thing. You will laugh and you will cry. If both of those things don't happen, I'll cheerfully refund your money, okay? Ralph Winter, the head of the U.S. Center for World Mission, said, I like this book better than the Bible. No, he didn't. I was just summarizing. Anyway, it's really good. Also, there's a book called An A to Z of Near-Death Adventures. If you set out to plant churches among the unreached, the devil's going to try and take your life over and over and over. And God is bigger than that. And God has saved my life so many times, I was able to alphabetize them. So A is for abyss, B is for bear, C is for cliff, D is for demons. It goes on and on and on. There's a kidnapping in here. Really exciting stuff. Don Richardson, who just went to be with the Lord, worked with cannibals. His neighbors ate people, and he said, a gripping read. What an adrenaline pumper. His neighbors ate people, okay? So I just wanted to point that out. You will like it. Anyway, and then my wife makes these incredible handmade greeting cards. Every penny goes to train indigenous midwives in the third world and saves the lives of mommies and babies in Africa and South America. So if you want to get in on that and have some great art to take home, please see us at the table. Thank you so much.